Alright guys, welcome back. So today I want to talk about burnishing. I've done a video on it before, but I've learned a little bit more and I've done some more experiments. So I just want to tell you the easiest way for me to burnish my earthenware pottery. You can do this with stoneware. I'm not sure if you can do it with porcelain, but you can get mirror-like finishes on your pottery without having to put a glaze. And you can see all this here is very reflective, and if I didn't press on it very hard, then it wouldn't have these ridge lines, but that's why you have to find out these different drying stages. So, update. You can burnish things by compressing the clay particles. That's how you burnish. You can burnish with, I've seen people do it with spoons, smooth pieces of wood, just metal in general, different metal utensils, stones, and that's what I use. I like to use stones because you're going to have to understand that, especially with clay that you've collected, there is going to be small, fine pieces of sand. Sand is quartz. It's made up of silica and some other components, but it will scratch majority of the things that you use to smoothen it. So if you use a piece of wood, that wood will get scratched up, and then it will no longer have that smoothability that you want to really make some smooth mirror-like walls like that, like the outside, so that you can really show the gradient in the color when it's fired. You can show the streaks whenever you do horsehair raku. That's going to be muffled the rougher your texture is. The rougher your texture, the harder it's going to be to see these colors, gradient details from smoke, streak lines, organic burns, and stuff like that appear on your pottery. It's going to be harder because it's rough. And the rougher it is, technically, the more surface area it has. The smoother it is, the less surface area it has. It's been compact. It doesn't have little micro pores that all these different things will get muddled and disappear into. So, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is the best thing to burnish with is a stone. A stone that has a higher Mohs, I think it's called Mohs, rating than anything that you're going to find in your clay. And majority of the hardness in any natural clay that you find is going to be some sort of quartz, which is around 7 to 8 on the Mohs scale. And here I have a piece of quartz that is around that same hardness. So what you want to do is find something either as hard or harder. If I wanted to buy some raw sapphire, that would probably be the most ideal thing to use, because you won't have to keep polishing the stone that is going to eventually burnish or polish your pots. Now, I want to talk to you about the stones that I'm using. I have a few ones here that I've been using that I just found from a river, and you can see that some of these stones are rough, and they get a little bit smoother as they progress. And this is the mirror one. So what I've done is I found stones that are primarily quartz, which all of these are primarily quartz, And if you want me to go in detail about what a quartz stone is, how you can find it, then message me in the comments or message me and I can tell you something in more detail. But this is how I have it set up. So I just have a rough stone that I found from the river that has a nice flat edge to it that I can compress, or at least start the rough stage of compression. That would be with this stone. Then I took a 500 grit and I smoothed down one side. I like this side because I can still get this little nubbed edge right here into some corners in different places, and it's not completely flat. It almost has just a slight curve to the top, which allows me to compress better. So I have that one. That's at 500 grit. The higher you go in grit, the smoother it gets. And remember, if you want a pot that has a mirror finish, then the thing that you're smoothing it with also has to have a mirror finish. So I went from 500. This one is 1,000. I do have a 2,000. I'm not sure where it is. It would go right here. And then I have my 3,000 mirror finish. And this mirror finish allows me to create a mirror finish on this pot without having to put any TerraSig. As you can see, the smoother your stone, the smoother your pot will be. So essentially I could keep building up my stones from 3,000 all the way up to 30,000, and I could have a very tight, compact burnish on each one of these. So that's the secret that I have right now to getting mirror-like finishes on my pots. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the different drying stages that you need to hit these at. So if you've never burnished before and you decided, man, I really want to get this guy looking like that guy, but I don't know how, or if you've been burnishing for a long time and you only burnish after it gets bone dry, this part of the video might be for you. So when I very first started out, I saw a lot of videos that talked about burnishing your pot when it's bone dry, or being close to bone dry, leather hard, which I could agree with the leather hard, but I would never start out burnishing with the bone dry and spraying water on it, because that's what they'll tell you to do. From my experience, and I'm not saying that they're wrong that you can't burnish at bone dry, what I'm saying is the process becomes a lot easier if you don't. So to burnish a pot at bone dry, you're gonna have to moisten it down again. So why don't you just go ahead and start with it already having some moisture in the pot and burnishing it then, instead of it being bone dry. If you're burnishing it at bone dry, this entire pot should already be dry. So you're only putting a moisture layer on the surface, and that will evaporate very quick with earthenware. So not only are you having to constantly have to reapply water and burnish one spot at a time, it's only compacting that very top layer, whereas this is still, you can see that it's still dry on the inside, it's still wet on the inside, and it's wet on the outside as well. So that means even this rim, even though it looks bone dry, it still has moisture on the inside in the middle here, and maybe a little bit on the outside or on the inside here too. But the fact remains that there's still moisture on the inside. So as I compact this down, it's still going to be able to push in because it has moisture on the inside, whereas this has no moisture. It's just like sandpaper, right? I'm just digging into sand and clay, dry clay. Whereas this, even though it looks bone dry on the rim, I don't know if you can see that there, but even though it looks bone dry on the rim, you can still compress that rim down because there's still moisture in it. So what I like to do is I like to come through every stage. So as you very first make your pot, you throw it on the wheel, whatever. You want to get as much of these grooves and all of these things like this right here. You want to take that off with a wooden rib or a metal rib. It really doesn't matter. You want to take all of that off, and then you want to compress it down as easily as possible without making more grooves into it like that. You want to get it as smooth as possible. That's the first step, and that's considered, to me, that would be considered my first burnish because you're compressing the clay. Not only are you taking things off the top, you're slightly compressing it, because if you're using a rib, you usually have a hand on the inside, the rib on the outside, and you're kind of compressing it together. Even though it's very slight, it's still a compression. That is making the wall of your pot stronger. So that's the first step. Now, this step right here, I've had it out in the sun and wind all day. It was wet yesterday. I put it out in the sun and wind today, and a lot of these have dried up very quickly. I can do that because I put temper in it and made the clay possible to dry, whereas most people have to let it sit indoors in a dark environment where there's not a lot of wind hitting it because it could crack. Mine don't do that. If you'd like to learn how to do that, I do have videos on tempering. But this is the next stage. So after you take it off, all this off, right? This one's still really wet. But as you take that off and all these ridges from your wooden rib, comes to this stage. Now, this is not, I wouldn't say this is that soft. It's still pretty hard. It's at around the leather hard stage. And really, you want to get it a little before that. At the leather stage, you want to get these almost very subtle rib lines down more. And you can do that on your wheel as well. All you have to do is start up your wheel, and just like you would do with the rib, you come and take your lowest grit rock and you just hold it there and slowly work it down as it spins. Slowly work it down as it spins, and that will help compress it. But you can see that when I put this on this pot, how it compresses it down. Just me barely sliding by it. I don't have to put a lot, but this helps smooth out that surface just a little bit more. You always want to start with your lowest grit rock, and all you're thinking about doing is compressing it, okay? You're not thinking about scraping anything off. All you want to do is slightly push in the clay and compress it. That's what a burnish is. Now you can already tell the difference. Bumpy, smooth, right? Bumpy, smooth, okay? You can already see more of a sheen, and this is just from my 500 grit rock. Now, as this dries, it's going to start looking ashy again, but remember that there's still moisture on the inside, and that moisture is going to have to pull out. It's going to have to evaporate. So it's going to draw moisture from the center out to the surface of the pot. And as it draws it to the surface of the pot, you have another chance to burnish it and compact it a little bit more. So my suggestion, and the way I do it, the way I have very strong, solid pots, and pots that also have mirror finishes on them, is just by going through each drying stage with it and burnishing it, going higher and higher in grit size as it progresses through its drying stages. So if you would like to this in action without me just talking about it, and actually go into a little bit more detail and maybe do one specific pot where I make it, and then I'll go through each individual stage and how to use the stones and when to use them, then just leave me a comment. Leave it down below if that's something that interests you. But I thought that I would make another video about burnishing again, because I do a little bit differently now, and the video that I had before still applies to burnishing, but I think there are a lot of easier ways to burnish. So if you enjoyed this video, if you got any information or entertainment from it, then please just leave a like and subscribe, and hopefully you'll share it with some friends. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next time.